Hi, my name is Sio, and we're about to go down one of the many currents in the warp to an alternate timeline known as the Angel Apostasy. We look at small changes to the origins of key figures of the Warhammer 40k setting that lead to wildly different outcomes for the galaxy at large. But before we go into what's changed, we need to recap who we're talking about. Rogal Dorn is known by many names. The Great Architect of the Imperium, the Praetorian of Terra, Autism Speaks Man of the Year, the list goes on and on. Respected, if not loved by all of his brothers, he was a leader of men, an exemplar of what we could be. During the Great Crusade to reunite the disparate pockets of humanity, Dorn did what all loyal sons of the Emperor had to do, and commit war crimes until the planet realized that they loved the Imperium as much as he did. Then he, special among his brothers, took the time to build infrastructure on those planets. Under his orders, the Imperial Fists built defenses and make-play places all over complied worlds so that the Imperium would be able to hold them now and forever. Let's not forget some of the fringe benefits of these defenses for the Legion. Setting up really cool, ominous building fortifications on these worlds, filled with a couple of Marines, always reminded the local populace to check the scoreboard so they never got a little too uppity. Those places are wonderful makeshift recruitment zones for new Marines as well, which is especially useful since the Imperial Fists are a fleet-based legion. Even walking up to these are trials themselves. Remember back when you were 12. Imagine summoning the courage necessary to visit the physical home of God's angels, who, within living memory, had devastated all of the might your entire planet could muster. The struggle of carrying those balls up to the door would show that you have what it takes to at least try out for the Imperial Fists. It may have been one of these practices, or a stout nature. Either way, he was selected by the Emperor himself to both design and defend the Imperial Palace. From who? Well, his brother Horus, favorite of the Emperor, got sepsis in his shoulder from rolling around on an LA Fitness yoga mat, and in his sweaty, rage-filled fugue state, decided to turn on Daddy after a depression spiral. "We don't really talk anymore," and "Daddy wish I had hair like Sangi" were common refrains all throughout the Horus heresy, but we're getting off topic. To truly understand a man, one must know where he came from. But unfortunately, more than most of his brothers, Rogal Dorn's origins are shrouded in myth, hearsay, and a lot of headcanon. That might mostly be me, but either way, we get the most direct evidence about his homeworld of Inwit from the Forge World Tome, the Horus Heresy Book 3, Extermination, pages 58 through 59. It contains only a brief description of the planet. Here's a small excerpt that I think describes the soul of his homeworld. Inwit was, and is, a world of death and cold. Its star is old and withered, bleeding the last of its heat as cold red light. While I could read to you the barely 2 pages, instead, here's Inwit in 2 words.
It stinks.
There are no resources, no light, just cold, and somehow giant predators which live off of spite and hack writing. The people who survive in this last circle of hell have grown hard, surviving off of the very last fruits of the Dark Age of technology. And that's really all you get. He's named Rogal and he's from House Dorn. Yada yada yada, he grows to conquer and lead a small multi-system empire who controls the Inwit cluster and beyond, and damn, is that 40 years? No wonder the Emperor picked him. That is not much to go on, but in conjunction with knowing the man he would become, pre- and post-heresy via the Black Library novels, it gives us fertile ground to start. And the malignant eye of the god Nurgle loves fertile ground to sow and roll around it when he's feeling zesty. Nurgle, an amassed warp consciousness beyond space-time, born of a culmination of emotions drawn from suffering, loss, fear, and the despair of opening up a game and being bored of it within 7 minutes, only for the cycle to repeat again and again until you get another hobby, but you don't have another hobby because you're 30 and you've been doing nothing but playing games for the last 23 years and the dopamine receptors are blown out, so you have nothing else to live for, so you keep chasing that dragon in a vain attempt to claw it back, but you can only do it because you only weep, and it's life. In this warped cordoned off section of reality, Nurgle takes a special interest in the hero of mankind, and he knows that Dorn's incubation pod will land on Inwit. So he plants a single seed, the wasting writ, a subtle sickness that once found already has your fate signed, co-signed, and notarized, considering it eats away at livestock and vegetation alike, leaving them withered with no known cure. This sets a stage for Rogal to live on Dorn Must Die mode, as now his planet is suffering from a horrible famine, which is ravaging both the populations of the Hives and the Wastelanders alike. Two quick asides. The first is that I thought Dorn was originally dealing with food insecurity, but I couldn't find anything to corroborate that. So, if any bit of this is canon, imagine this just makes it far worse. Second, I've seen many references to House Dorn, and I imagine, like most of his brothers, Dorn and his sons adopt and adapt cultural practices from his homeworld. Clearly, the Imperial Fists and Black Templars are inspired by various ages of Germanic culture, and most prominently the Holy Roman Empire. However, the planet is not an arboreal death world with a stand-in black forest and Rhine. No, it's an icy death world called Inwit, with its only galactic export, a small movie called Sasuk of the South, and to ignore that seems like a waste. So, I figure, let's lean into that with horrifying winds of nitrogen particles from a post-Dark Age war, which constantly blow on the surface of the world, causing the flash freezing of anything foolish enough to fall for the lie of the light's warmth. This prevents most conventional craft from traveling from hive to hive, but still allows totally reasonable people to go rip a heater in boots and basketball shorts for a while. And while hives are obviously self-sustaining with eternal trade, I imagine there's a need for some novelty of extra hive products on a barren ice world. So, this state of affairs left a role for wandering clans to work as traders. In the Angel Apostasy, House Dorn was at first Clan Dorn, a large family of traders who navigated the tunnels of Inwit to facilitate trade between the hives. The families within the hives have Germanic cultural influences, with great houses leading from within the spires, all of which disdain the extra-hival people. That brings us to the beginning of our Golden Primarch story. The hives, struggling with the writhing writ, trade less, and as a secondary consequence, the traveling caravans are dying out. This includes the Dorn clan, who is barely hanging on. One fateful night, after they have encamped in an old traveling tunnel, they hear an explosion and the ground rumbles beneath their feet. The eventual leader of the 7th Legion has crash-landed not too far from them. After a search party finds the pod, Clan Dorn's patriarch named Rogal has to make a call. Rogal is a weathered old man who puts the well-being of his clan before all, and despite his yearnings, he steels his heart and orders his protesting men to leave. Let's pause for a moment and think about what kind of hold these Primarchs have on the minds of mortal men. We all know about how regular Marines, their quote-unquote sons, feel an instinctual urge to prostrate themselves before the Primarchs, but we usually see regular humans all but overcome with awe. Undoubtedly, it's due, in no small part, to the fact that they're over 12 feet tall, out of armor, and look like angels on HGH. However, I don't think that's all. I imagine there's some sort of similar psychic hold on normal mortal men that they have on their sons. However, it's less kowtowing, more worship or flight-inducing. And, as a baby, I think similar mechanics were in place to ensure their survival, regardless if the Emperor had planned their universal frisbee practice or not. Think of how most baby mammals have huge eyes, which endear them to other mammals. Doesn't even have to be the same species. The Emperor is the type of man to have a hold my beer moment and give his sons both physical and warp-esque pheromones to cause people to yearn to protect them. With that in mind, imagine how determined a person you'd have to be to hold on to your conviction in the face of all of that. I imagine that is the man who originally raised Dorn. But in the Angel Apostasy, he's adopted by someone else first. Unbeknownst to the men, they were followed by the clan's teenage selfish malcontent, Akna. Unrelentingly curious, she waits until they leave, checks the pod, and is overcome with emotion. She immediately snatches the baby before the horrible environment or any of the terrifying predators which lurk in the dark can snatch them both up. She finds sanctuary in a small cave bored into the ice. After securing it with an industrial space heater, she throws flares out in the snow to alert a potential rescue party, hangs ferns up to make it feel a little bit more homey, and makes sure the babies all look nice and cozy-wozy. Remember those aforementioned pheromones and psych warpery? Well, they decimate this emotionally vulnerable teenage girl. She's unbalanced at the best of times, and this baby, while her top priority, is leaving her all sorts of messed up. Till she takes a second and closer look at the cave. She can tell that it's new and is unable to break her habitual selfishness, despite this being the most important thing in her world, and thus needs to explore the adjoining tunnels that she found. She did everything a person could reasonably do for a new baby, except stay with him. What can I say? Some people aren't cut out to be parents. Unfortunately for the galaxy at large, this leads to her eventual gruesome death at the hands of an anvil. An anvil, for reference, is a giant burrowing insectoid megafauna that, despite originating on a desert death world, has spread across the galaxy due to its unusual hyper-hardiness and the hubris of rogue traders wanting to keep them in their menageries. This particular anvil has pierced the spine of Acna, who's desperately trying to reach out to the baby right in front of him while he watched from a heap of clothing. The baby, being a baby, despite its nature as a Primarch, does the only thing it can think of and stays instinctively and utterly motionless. Traumatized now, it stays put until a search party, led by Rogal, eventually finds the cave and takes the boy in, allowing him to take her place as far as resource allocation goes. The space boy is named Amakjok and is raised as one of the Dorn. He's adopted by Rogal alongside Akna's younger brother. As he grows in the caravan, he has many interactions with the Hive Dwellers and their Germanic-inspired culture. He learns both the love and value of honor and to despise the human bureaucrat. He grows large and wide, helping the clan all but flourish with his genius intellect despite the exceedingly harsh conditions. That is, until tragedy strikes, when at the same time he is outperforming his ceremonial hunt for his trial of manhood, a pod of wild animals attack the caravan, dragging off food and people. Amakjok comes back and is surprised at the lack of reception before he sees the destruction of the camp, and is waved in to see Rogal all torn up on his deathbed. Now remember, he has an edict memory, and while he's not a supercomputer like Perturabo, let's say, core memories are still as clear as when they happened and inform his every move. He sees the injuries and is told what he already knows. Ambles messed up the caravan and killed his pa. Before Rogal dies, he bequeaths his ceremonial name as leader of the tribe and entrusts their survival to him. Oh, and Rogal of Clan Dorn does. But I can go more into details of exactly how and why, but I'll save that for the published short story and audiobook in the playlist you can find in the description of this video. Suffice it to say, his clan turned house eventually rises to rule the Hive, then the planet, and eventually a small multi-solar empire before the Emperor comes a-knockin'. How is he able to do that in the, again, damn, 40 years? Similar to how he was in the main canon, but this time he's motivated by a heavy internal fear of loss, so he's extra preoccupied with securing his holdings, and in turn his empire is a little smaller than it was in the main canon. Every passing year, that foundation of fear warps his perception and priorities more and more. For example, his initial meeting with the Emperor quickly turns sour for Rogal, as the needs of the Great Crusade require men and material, which would otherwise go to defending Dorn's holdings. Not unwise, he makes a promise to use the Phalanx in the Emperor's name, but specifically does not offer it up as a gift. And, when alone with his adoptive brother, reveals his true priorities, keeping his kin's line from going out, and Dorn's new secret project. The Bulbado, a genetic derivative of the Ayuk berry, one of the few staple crops on Inwit. Dorn modified a protein from the writhing writ to enable an almost cancer-like bloom of life within the plant. He believes that if he can Johnny Appleseed-like plant his crop across the galaxy, its positive health effects will help the Imperium more than any tithe of arms would. Motivated reasoning, sure, but in this, I'm pro-gains for the people.
No offense, but it sounds like that's some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Along with the Bulbado, his personal obsession with the survival of his previously diminishing house goes overboard. So much so that whenever he spends any decent length of time on a ship, he installs secret chambers with vitawombs. They are cloning machines, most notable for helping keep the numbers up of the World War I pastiche, whom I love, don't get me wrong, the Death Corps of Krieg. By all outward appearances to the other legions, the Imperial Fists are the same stalwart band of honorable Marines with the same implacable Primarch. Dorn's brothers, who know him well, would find him to be mostly the same, except for the rare suboptimal calls, whose justification is layered, obscured, and vehemently, occasionally violently, argued. Imagine there's an orc invasion coming, and one world where Dorn has seeded quite a few Bolbados, and some of Clan Dorn are living there. He would make a call that, no, we have to go on planet and fight them, where they're like, no, we'll just exterminatus the planet, and then we'll cut the head off the orc invasion. Dorn would make a bunch of irrational calls, where otherwise he would, acquiesce to the wisdom of the sacrifice. Now here's where I would go more into details about his legion and his relationship with his brothers, but I think this is the most interesting part. His fall to Nurgle.
Stinky.
A preface. For the second time, I think the narrative tale does a better job of conveying this information, so I highly recommend listening to that audiobook video series down below, or reading the short first before listening to this basically an explicit summary of what's in the story. Spoilers from here on out. Dorn is wasting his precious time away from the front lines, making sure already compliant planets are both secure with Imperial Fist infrastructure and seeded with his personal projects. This is when he gets an astropathic message about Sanguinius, the Archon, soon to be crowned War Master, and he needs to get his ass there. He's totally interested, until the same astropath starts shrieking about miasma and starts rotting alive before she's summarily executed. He's thinking about this while on a smaller vessel en route to meet the Phalanx and just entered the warp. This is when things turn horribly. The void shields fail and the navigator becomes possessed. While his honor guard and top librarian do away with it, it's still able to infect Dorn's mind. From a reverberating puddle of bloody pus, a mimetic contagion which takes advantage of his fearful state of mind is transferred via the medium of silly rhymes. Dorn, now concerned for his current crop of clones on ship, leaves the bridge to head solo for the secret chamber. Now doing this while the void shields are down is beyond suicidal, but Dorn really just doesn't care. Partially, he feels, through experience, that being the son of the Emperor means he could tough it through anything and come out unscathed. And for the time, he's correct. His very presence keeps reality in check around him. That is, until Nurgle farts a big green cloud of condensed warp god will towards the ship. This activates a trigger that's been lying dormant inside of him. What he didn't know was that he participated in an unholy sacrament, unknowingly eating the withered berry from Akna as a baby, and then later willfully eating a plump Bolbado as a man, created symbolic conditions ripe for Nurgle to infect. Symbolism and emotion are the lifeblood of chaos, so performing those actions and living in constant dread, damn Dorn. There are two effects of this virus of the soul. The first relates to Dorn and his genetic Astartes sons. They suffer from the original compact. They will, over an arbitrarily long and agonizing period of time, mutate into beings blessed by Nurgle, into some pseudo-insectoid Astartes creature. The second revolves around everyone else who has taken in the virus. When near the 7th Legion, their life force will be drained from them, and they will wither until dead. Slower around Dorn's sons, but incredibly rapid for Rogal himself. Death by this sort creates an effect similar to the zombie plague, in that it will raise the dead as an infectious zombie. Rogal soon finds out that the clones are dying fast, except for a randomly selected few who are quote-unquote more resilient to it. Their DNA is sampled again in the vitawombs, now being dangerously overrepresented in the DNA sample. Mixed with the cloning process being done at a dangerously accelerated rate, they come out sickly or mutated, all in an attempt to breed a being totally resilient to their warp curse. This is happening while the other human crew is quickly dying, and the Imperial Fist's librarian is desperately trying to find a way out of the warp. They eventually get out, and it only takes a short 200 years. By the time they get out, it's almost no time has passed in real space, and they're right outside of the Inwit cluster. Waiting for him in real space is an Eldar Farseer who, to be blunt, just can't stand humans. She has seen visions of him entering Nurgle's garden and wants to use him as a way of potentially saving Isha, the Eldari goddess of fertility, nature, healing, and folk music, who was abducted by Nurgle after Slash was born and wanted to maybe sort of vor her. Don't look it up. The Eldar issues a parley, and Dorn reluctantly meets with her. She tries her best not to spurg out like that one elf comic that Eldari find racist, but fails because elves are spurgs and end up locking Dorn as Astartes in place with warp magics. She tries to pick up her spaghetti with mind blasts of potential futures and Mad TV reruns for Rogal. He sees his corrupted Astartes conquer and subjugate worlds. He sees people being thrown into breeding pits and hive worlds being turned into literal versions of themselves, with all the bio buildings that entails. He then sees into Nurgle's garden, where he witnesses swarms of mutated demon clones of the Dorn house constantly add to this massive, ever-expanding pseudo-imperial palace. Psychically flying in towards its center, he finds Isha tied up by Nurgle's slime tendrils, while her jailer stands off to the side, working on creating better cloned monsters. Her jailer, obviously, is Daemon Prince Dorn, head to toe in chitinous armor, somewhat reminiscent to an anvil in places. He sees himself and can't take the fact that he's getting mogged in both build and height, but also he can see behind the eyes that it's a version of himself freed from fear. He's unable to confront the truth and lets out a psychic scream which momentarily releases him from her grip and allows him to embrace his tsundere lovingly. A jealous simp of an accompanying Eldar sees this and focuses on Dorn instead of the Astartes, resulting in a nobody likes Millhouse moment, and all the Eldar get turbo-murdered. Dorn decides, after all the bloodshed and caked-on piles of sediment and trauma, that he wants to go see his brother. And this is where our story ends. What happens next is for another day, but I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you like my 40k writing and want to see more, I host them for free on my Substack, and archive of my own. Links in the description. If you want to read some original stories by me, or just want to support me in this channel, you can by subscribing to my Substack. I have original sci-fi and fantasy stories I'm proud of, more of which are coming. I also have two other channels, CO's Shorts, which contain any new short meme content I used to do on this channel, and CO's Stories, a YouTube channel I have to host all my long-form audiobook-like content. Thank you for watching, I really do appreciate it. Until our next adventure, CO.